Hello there, good afternoon, and welcome to Resilient Masterminds, brought to you by the Economic Times and by Microsoft. Thank you all for joining us. Warm welcome and thanks to all the panelists for sparing time and to all the audience members to join us today and listen to us. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharya. I'm Senior Editor of the Economic Times. I will host today's discussion. This is the second episode of a series of 8 power-packed brainstorming sessions with C-suite leaders of India Inc. And so you should really keep a watch out for the rest of the series. This is the second one. And today, in the second edition, we are going to have two very exciting sessions. The first is a panel discussion with chief operating officers on the subject, building strategic leadership for a hybrid future. And after that, me and my colleague Suchetna Ray, who's the senior assistant editor of ET, we will have a stimulating chat with Arvind Gupta, founder and head of the Digital India Foundation. I'm sure you will enjoy both sessions. So let's start off. Now, for the first session, let me start by introducing the panel to you. It's a very strong power-packed panel of leaders. We have with us Jairaj Shanmugam, COO of Bangalore International Airport.
Hello, everyone.
We have Rahul Russell, COO of Future Generali India Insurance Company. We have Ajoy Singh, COO of Fractal Analytics. We have RS Sajdeva, COO of Eicher Trucks and Buses. We have Rajiv Sodhi, COO of Microsoft India. We have Monish Darda, co-founder and CTO of iCertis. And we have Manpreet Singh Ahuja, Chief Digital Officer of PwC India. Thank you all, gentlemen, for finding time and coming to the discussion today. Now, in today's world, you are either a digital company or you are dead. This is a famous saying that we heard about 2 years ago, much before COVID hit us. So today, after the pandemic has hit, the truth of this statement has hit us very, very hard. Now, because this digital effort is so crucial to companies, we would like to start this panel discussion with something on how digital can impact business strategy. And for that, I would like to invite Manpreet of PwC to set the context for today's discussion through an understanding of digital transformations strategies for enterprises. Manpreet, over to you.
Hi, Alok. So just setting the context, I don't think we've got to get ready for the hybrid future. The hybrid reality is here. And I think we've got to go past the mindset of, we've accommodated well, we've managed the risk and exposure well by being able to work remotely. We've got to convert that into a strategic advantage. And it's easier said than done. There is a lot of thinking, a lot of investment, a lot of prioritization that leaders are supposed to do to be able to make this a edge over a world that has fundamentally transformed in this last 12 to 12 odd months. So, and one of the biggest shifts that we've all learned in this period as companies, as clients, because I come from a consulting world, is that the customer itself has changed. The customer's needs and demands have changed. And the good news is corporates have responded reasonably fast and rapidly in addressing to that changed need. So while that's a happy news, and we hear saying, we've done our digital transformation and we're in good shape, but the ground reality is this change going to stick? Is this change, done well enough to exploit the real benefits of some of the investments that have been done? Or are you a company that's staying in the fringe? Is really where, smart companies are spending the time and energy to decipher this issue. So if I were to go back, so one of the biggest shifts that have happened in this period is that the customers themselves have dramatically moved to online channels, and companies have responded. Companies have started thinking about an omni-channel experience, and they have made the investments to be able to engage with the customer much more effectively in a remote environment. But I don't think that's fully solving and gearing them up for the future. This is just being at the fringe right now, and the companies will have to rewire themselves to really exploit the benefit and the opportunity that's at the table. And really what I want to say is a lot of corporate India is wired around employees being the heart of the organization, and a company kind of bringing in the values and the cultures and the operating ecosystem that enables the organization to deliver to a customer. And as far as we are concerned, we think that this whole model is kind of going upside down, where companies will have to rewire themselves with the customer being in the center. And actually, the entire employee and the ecosystem, whether it's alliances, whether it's gig workforce, rallying around the customer with the actionable data and insights that digital today provides to them to be able to offer insights and create better value. And companies will actually begin to be a broader construct, loosely knit, a much wider definition than what it historically used to be, because you will have alliances, you will have cloud relationships, you will have an ecosystem that would have been built together like a set of network nodes that will work together to provide value to relationships that exist within that network. If you have to navigate to that shift where customer gets to the center, you'll have to rewire the organization. You will have to rewire the customer journeys where functional ecosystems will not help. It will largely be cross-functional teams working together to reimagine the customer journeys. And then you will have to bring in the power of digital. You will have to bring in the power of data. You will have to bring in the power of intelligent automation to be able to provide a seamless environment to customers. And that is where the COOs of today will be facing the challenge of how to prioritize and how to make the right investments in enabling this shift to stay. While customers the most important piece, it just also is equally important that the employee environment also has the right data and the right actionable insights to be able to thrive in this environment. And the famous thought that comes to the mind is, I don't think anybody has seen us more closely over the last 365 days as maybe a Microsoft Teams has. What will it take for us to imagine the actionable insights that it can throw back to an employee, keeping all the privacy and confidentialities in mind, for the employee to operate much better and deliver to a customer much better. And that will be the workplace of the future that we've got to get ready with. Just the last point I want to make is the whole modularity that we will have to start bringing into the organization, because whether it is scaling at a very fast pace or gearing up for reconfiguring ourselves for dealing with crisis, crisis management and resilience weren't necessarily as much a top of agenda, till about 12 months back. But today, with leveraging the gig ecosystem, the cloud ecosystem, there is a certain modularity that businesses can bring to the table, that digital can bring to the table, that can help us scale up or reconfigure to deal with a crisis or a situation, and be able to do a hyper customization of the business and the offerings to customers. So this is the changed world, and it is like being on a treadmill to exploit the opportunity, leveraging all the data that is available around us to make a sustained difference to the marketplace. Thank you.
Thanks, Manpreet. That's a lot of very, very interesting things. What I really was thinking about when you were presenting this is how do you do this modular kind of approach, for cross-functional teams? We are actually saying that let there be no hard and fast distinctions of functions, right? Instead, take projects and bring cross-functional teams into customer-centric projects. Is that what you're saying? Is that possible
Yeah.
to do across multi-office and multinational corporations like, say, Microsoft?
If I were to go first, Alokda, and for everyone here on the panel, I just think that is a reality and it's no more a choice. There were times when we were geared up with functions that were responsible for an aspect of the business. I'm a business planning function that would look at some historical data, make a strategy, and let the business run for a year, and then I will revisit it at the end of a quarter or at the end of the year. Gone are those days. You have to be closer to the customer and you have to be gathering data at every stage of that journey. So, I mean, if I were to be a cola company, and let's say if I serve a billion drinks to a customer, how is it that I can be configured in a way such that I gather insight from each transaction and and then I'm able to bring a better product or a better experience to my customer, is how we'll have to reconfigure ourselves to. And the only way you can do that is by, you know, operating in a virtual environment where you have V teams coming together with multiple capabilities, delivering to a particular agenda and a project.
Since I took Microsoft's name, let Rajiv come in on that. What's your view on this?
Yeah, no, I was about to come in, Alok, and let me add to Manpreet. I think it is absolutely the right thing. He set the stage basically, right? You'll have to rewire your firm. You'll have to do that on the back of technology. And what you said, right? Can this be modularized? Can this work in a multifunctional sort of an environment? We call this the digital feedback loop, right? Today, you live in a world where data gets generated and comes from all aspects, right? You get data from your customers, you get data from your employees, you get data from your products, the instrumentation that you have, and you get data from your operations. I think how you pick up that data, how you bring it all together, run the analytics on it, run machine learning and AI on it, and then create that into insights which you can then inform back, right? Because getting the insight is of no use if you cannot take action on that insight. And that to me is the digital feedback loop, right? Collecting data and signal from the market and from the various operations of your business. Running insight and creating the insight out of it and then informing your operation back. And in fact, Alok, I would like to point out that, we've started to look at true digital companies or true companies that are leveraging the power of data and AI are companies that use signal from one department to actually inform the action of another department. That creates a fully digital enterprise to us. And a good example here is, if you look at, for example, Myntra, what they've done is use the power of data as COVID hit us, world shifted to online e-commerce. They used over 500,000 to 1 million customers and the signals coming from that to actually inform suppliers saying what products are in demand, what should you stock, what should you sell, and actually use that power to make Myntra much, much more resilient and agile to customer needs. So that's an example of data being used, to create this digital enterprise that Manpreet spoke about.
Recording, we're discussing about, hey, is the lockdown going to come back? Yes, if we know that's going to happen, and if there is a chance at least, then maybe we can plan for this better to take advantage of that fact, right? And it's a weird thought, but here's where in my mind, the change happens. With the chief operating officer for the last year, it's been a chief ouch officer. You wake up, you say, hey, I want to go, go remote, take 5,000 people remote in less than a week. And then, I have this logistics problem. I have to deliver laptops. I have to deliver vaccines. I have to deliver, manage my logistics, cold chain, all the problems we have all been facing. It's been ouch after ouch after ouch. So now you have to kind of, and I think Manpreet also set up that context very well. You have to think about, how data, analytics, cloud, the digital side of things, which are virtual, which don't need a physical presence and a physical avatar in the real world. How do you leverage that to the fullest?
I'll take it to the next level. Exactly 1 year ago when COVID hit us, Fractal was called into service by municipal corporation to make sense of what's happening. You remember the situation a year ago. We were not aware of how the disease is progressing. We were not aware of what are the hotspots, how many beds are available. We were called in to make sense of all of this data, get data from multiple hospitals, understand the international traffic which is coming in, understand which beds are empty, where are the pockets of hotspot. Now, in a non-digital world, imagine doing that, getting so much data, making sense of it, and taking it back for action would have taken multiple weeks. But we partnered with cloud partners. A lot of team came together, and imagine we did it in 3 days. In 3 days, we were able to use hyper agile ways of getting all of this together, giving the insights back to the municipal corporation so that they can save lives, they can manage hospital capacities, and they can make sure that restrictions are placed where it's required, and then move forward. So I think in this world, working in a hyper agile way has become possible exactly because of technologies which are coming in, whether it's cloud, digital, AI, all those kind of things. And I think time is no longer a luxury. Those days of, mapping your digital journey over 2 to 3 years period, those are gone. It has to be done in a matter of weeks or months, if not hours.
Jairaj had come in before you, Rahul, so I'll just ask him to finish first. Because I'd really like to know the airport view, because you're also heavily regulated. I mean, apart from the other, restrictions and everything, airports is a very, very difficult business to be in, even in normal times, right? So what has this done to your operational, flexibility and agility, and what are the things that have changed?
Lakesh, thanks for that. The airport and the aviation industry has always been at the forefront of technology. It's always been technology driven. And in fact, like they say, every crisis presents an opportunity. what happened during the the crisis itself, during the COVID crisis, is that the Ministry of Civil Aviation told us that, guys, if you want to reopen operations safely, please ensure contactless travel. And that gave us an opportunity to how to remove all the stamping of boarding passes. Remember stamping of boarding passes? When they used to stamp your boarding, or they check your boarding passes 100 times before you finally reach the gate, all that is gone. So from the time a passenger enters the terminal right up to the gate, it's purely contactless. You just scan your boarding pass and you just pass through the various checkpoints. That technology was always there, but we always got resistance from various stakeholders because they said, look, you must stamp the boarding pass, you must check the boarding pass, you physically must hold the document to check. But because of this crisis, we're able to push through some of this technology agenda across. And in fact, Bangalore Airport was the first airport in the world to have a fully contactless travel from from the entry to the terminal right up to the gate. And riding on that, we introduced more contactless facilities, like you can order your food on the app and the food is delivered to your seat at the terminal itself. You don't have to join the queue to buy your food. We also introduced a virtual help desk. Previously, used to have these counters where a staff will be sitting there and every passenger goes up to ask questions. Now we made that completely virtual. You just put a screen there and there's a staff sitting somewhere centrally answering questions. So people have got used to these virtual platforms. They've got used to technology, and we are riding on it to see how best we can push the envelope even much further. Right. You're right. It is highly regulated, but because of the crisis, I think even the regulators are looking at the benefit of using technology to make travel seamless.
Yeah, but Jairaj, just bringing in a perspective there. I mean, the amount of data that hopefully an airport generates, and the possibility of making travel a great experience. Not every travel is the same. A corporate travel is different from a family traveling to somebody who's spending a bomb to make an experience. I mean, I still feel there's this massive opportunity of exploiting that data and giving that predictive insight or an experience such that there's an intimate relationship of a customer traveling into the airport. That's still an opportunity, and somebody who used to travel 3 times a week, I'd love to see that happen.
Absolutely, Manpreet. But the perennial problem always has been who owns the customer data, right? When the customer enters the airport, he's actually the airline's customer. As an airport, how do we use that data? How can we share that data with the airlines in order to provide a seamless service? And that's what we are working on. We introduced what they call the Zovis queue management system in August last year, where we can track a particular passenger from the time they enter the terminal right up to the gate to see how many minutes they spend at each checkpoint. We are using that data to see how best to manage resources, how best to tell in real time to tell airlines to please, you have to open up your counters because the number of passengers in the queue is exceeding 10 minutes, for example. So we are working with the airlines, but you're absolutely right. When I was in the airline, when I was on the other side, and now in the airport, of course, but previously when I was the airline, that's absolutely what we wanted to do. There's so much, tons of data.
It's an interesting perspective that as an airline, you sometimes wonder there'll be better valuation and business returns if you could just use that data and exploit that for a certain insight or benefit.
I'm wondering if you're even allowed to keep that data for very long.
Yes. Because of course you're covered by the privacy laws, data privacy laws.
That's the thing, Rahul, because insurance and auto, both of these, especially trucks and buses, the commercial vehicles part, right? They're huge indicators of economic movement and all. And insurance companies during this lockdown and all, your business models were turned completely upside down. Tell us how that impacts your operations.
I first just want to set a little bit of context of our thought process. Today all of us are talking about resilience, recovery, a never before crisis. And I ask myself, is it our birthright to be unprepared for COVID just because this is our first time COVID is happening? There's going to be a Novid, Shovid, happening every year. COVID is just a root cause. The impact of COVID is something that you should actually be stress testing on your business model. Now, I come from the insurance industry and I come from the life insurance industry. We've always presented ourselves as extremely face-to-face, advisory-driven. Unless I meet the customer, touch and feel and build trust, there is no opportunity for sale. Now, this is a fundamental building block that should be tested in any kind of a stress test where you say there is something happening to your business model. COVID is just an excuse, the way I look at it. So it's quite unfair that we should allow ourselves the leeway of being unprepared for this. On a second spec, people have been talking about digital since times immemorial. At least this century, everybody speaks about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been moving digital even in the insurance industry. Every insurer is a digital, yet 90% happens face to face till COVID hit us. What happened actually is that the front ending of the entire business model turned more and more digital. But the way you underwrite customers, the way you process an application, the way you provide a customer experience remained completely manual in nature. So even if I provide a great tab to my sales employees and they can go and meet a customer, what COVID did was that now you have the tab, you have all the equipment, but you can't be face to face. So the whole mindset that I have all the information with me, but I'm going to do what we are doing today. This seminar 1 year ago happened with all of us sitting in a particular room and talking to each other. Never like this. So that mindset itself was not changed. So I have all the equipment, but I don't have the ability or the mindset to actually be remote and complete the same process. And which is why this whole modularity of how we interact with each other. Now, the employees have to be able to interact with technology and together interact with the prospect. I think that is a big jolt for the entire insurance industry. Of how do you train the mindset? How do you retrain the mindset of your employees? I think that's where the business model struggled, and which is why I keep asking myself, should we have not been prepared for this eventuality where I cannot meet my prospect and yet need to complete my business model?
It's a very good question you ask, Rahul, because there are companies who are more than 100 years old when the last pandemic hit us. And I don't think we've learned much from that experience. So we'll let that part be. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Did I interrupt you?
No, not at all. So basically, what this has done is that the whole digital mindset has now allowed us to carry forward. And as a chief operating officer, the first thing that comes to my mind is, operational risk. Now, everybody talks about operational risk, but if I look at it technically, it was only in 1999 that the Basel Committee on, banking supervision actually published the papers on this between 1999 and 2001. And they basically said that they elevated this to an independent, which is a distinct and controllable risk, requiring its own tools and organization. So you have a pandemic, we are all moving digital. Operational risk is at the core of any financial institution, yet operational risk is a very nascent field. We are yet trying to understand the interconnectivities. With the advent of digital and with the advent of analytics, I think the ability to forecast operational risk is sort of changing. And I think that's one piece which all financial institutions, and more so, people who predict the future like insurance are sort of grappling with right now. I mean, that's the biggest difference that I see. The focus, the TINA factor, saying that now there is no longer an alternative. I have to rely on predictive rather than extrapolatory attitudes towards business. I think that is another aspect that is preparing us for the hybrid present or present reality or the hybrid future. That's the big difference I see.
I can just add to what Rahul just said, highlighting that mindset that he was talking about. We did a study with, along with IDC of all our customers. And it clearly showed that one, everybody considered innovation to be an imperative, and that's okay, that's fine. That was there earlier also. But I think what was heartening to see that over 65-70% of the organization said that post-COVID, innovating and driving the innovation agenda within an enterprise, within their companies, had become far easier. Because the pandemic had sort of created that TINA, the no alternative, or created the imperative to do that. And I just wanted to highlight that how real this mindset is, because we saw that across with governments, we saw that with some of the regulated industries, we saw that in healthcare, we saw that in education. It is across all pervasive, I would say. And I think that is one of the trends that is here to stay. COVID or no COVID, even when the world comes to normal, we will see this shift taking a full, getting even more of momentum than where we are right now.
Rajendra, I remember April of 2020 when there were zero deliveries of passenger cars. That was a nightmare to everybody, right? I don't remember the commercial vehicle numbers, but I don't suppose they would be much better at that time because of the lockdown. The very thought of risk really hit must have hit you very, very hard, in that month and the ensuing months. So how has this pandemic, changed your views towards operational agility, flexibility, and through technology? And after you, I'll come to it.
Oh, thanks. I've heard from all the speakers. I can say VCV is a joint venture with Volvo, iShares joint venture with Volvo, and we manufacture a commercial vehicle. And everything has come to standstill. We have been working on the digitalization before that, 5-6 years before that. We started both on the customer interface, supply chain management, as well as manufacturing interface and R&D interconnectivity. All those areas we have been working on the digitalization, but it was India before 1991 when everybody talked about liberalization, but nobody actually did when it crisis came. So paradigm, the inflection point came the COVID. That all the tools which we had developed definitely we use. And if I look at VC, we are typical typical manufacturing company. If you see that one basket is the customer interface and R&D. Second interface is supply chain, and third is the sales. In all the three areas, we saw that digitalization, as many have put across the TINA factor, that now we look at and say that how do we collaborate? In R&D, the major thing is how do you need to collaborate, getting the feedback from your downstream function and incorporating the product and develop a product. When almost 4 months, 5 months, people were operating from home and no chance of having the physical meeting, then the digital phase came into an IDM, like we have got integrated data management digitalization platform is there with us. That helped us to connect all the people, and still we could talk with each other, give feedback, review the technicality, and go for the new product introduction. That was one thing. And if I look at how our sales team were connected with the customers, same. You are generating the inquiry, but mindset was unless Rahul said that unless you sit in front of customer, you can't sell the truck. This was a paradigm. But our digitalization team came out with the digital model of the vehicle. And when we presented to the customer, and initial our hit rate was 1 in 100. And after 4 months, our hit rate has improved to around 10 in 100. 100 interaction, and you are generating almost 100 inquiries into the firm orders. So 1 to 100 to 10 to 100, that was the improvement over 4 months. And that happened because we could take that digital model of the vehicle specification and demonstrate actually how the vehicle performed. That were helped. And third thing, when I look at supply chain and manufacturing, now this is a very difficult area. In April, we produce 0 truck. In May, we produce 400, and this month we'll produce 7,000 trucks. That's the ramp up. You can see that. And today, we are not able to meet the demand. I can say I'm falling short. Even after producing 7,000, I'm falling short by 25%. But how it is happening? It is even today, COVID in MP, where in Indore also we see that number of cases are going up, but people are working on assembly line. Physical people are working on my line, my supervisor, everybody is there on the line. Of course, all the COVID precautions they're taking, but how the digital thing is helping. S&OP process, all the customer inquiry from the dealers are getting consolidated in our Udaan platform, which is a digital platform. There, all the inquiries get converted into the firm order, which come to us. Through IDM, the data from R&D goes to manufacturing, and through the ESAP system, we are ensuring that all the models, the data is generated, which is the product data is generated, parts are being procured, call-off system is being implemented for the suppliers also. So all the interfaces of the organization, we are able to use the digital. That's why we are today surviving as an organization. Had that digital platforms, either in the customer interface, on the supply chain interface, and the R&D interface would not have been there, this organization would have been standstill. I can say very clearly. And this has opened a new paradigm shift in the organization. And really, we see that today we are able to connect to the customer. And one thing more I want to say that we had always we wish to meet the customer. I think again I'm going to Rahul what you are saying that you are able to convert. We were looking at the data that how many customers we have met on the digital platform and how many have placed the order. 85% customer have placed the order after meeting them on the digital platform, understanding their product or understanding their problem from the past thing, or going for the repeat order and convert that into all that we are able to convert that into 85% order we are able to convert. I think this is becoming a way of life if I look at that. And engaging employees, engaging customer, engaging our supply chain, manufacturing, suppliers, or stakeholder and dealers. This is what has helped us to remain. And today, as I said, that supply is demand is outpacing the what we can supply today. That's where we stand today. And there I see that one downside is that when we plan the meetings or interaction, it is end to end. 4 o'clock, one meeting finish, 4 o'clock, second meeting starts. That is putting a lot of pressure on people. Place.
And Ajay, you had a point to make. You want to?
I have a couple of points. So Rahul said that everyone had been talking about digital for many years, and pretty much nothing was happening. And Rahul, I believe a lot of digital makeup was happening. People were just working on digital on the fringes, and so that was one thing that was happening. In this age, we have to actually change the core of the business using digital and not just tweak digital. And I think other thing coming from AI industry, I would like to say that AI is very effective, but it alone is not sufficient. I think we are not using the power of design thinking, behavioral sciences, solid cloud-based engineering to create the magic out of AI. And in any digital strategy, unless all these multidisciplinary thought processes come together, we will not be able to make a magic.
Ajay, interesting point that you raised, if I may just add one thing. When we speak about interconnectivity, and we worked in silos. Today, HR is a function. HR manages people, HR manages talent. What is AI? Is AI a resource? Is AI talent? I think this interconnectivity between managing talent as two subsections of human beings and artificial intelligence is preparing for the future, because it's a fact. Today, a lot of the pushback in terms of not enforcing, but implementing some of these strategies is because people feel, mindset again, that redundancy is going to be impinged upon them should we have artificial intelligence in underwriting. Yeah. So again, this is something which is preparing for the future. How do you manage these two resources for the future to prepare for that hybrid interconnectivity?
It's human and
Monish
AI,
on that.
not human or AI.
Yeah, Monish, your view on this? Because we tend to hear all these technology terms, AI, ML, in isolation. But the fact is the technology more important, or is the design more important?
I think Ajay said it well. You have to have humans and machines work together. I think that's the future. There's a very great author that I follow, Isaac Asimov, and he looked at the future and science fiction really, and he said, hey, this is the merging of humans and robots is what humanity is all about. And if you can see it around yourselves, I think the decisions that you take today, we don't know how much we are influenced by the technology around us. And one of the important things here in my mind, we do contract lifecycle management, right? So contract is the center of the universe for us. We are seeing more and more people and more companies coming back and saying, hey, this is getting out of hand. The risk and the compliance needs that we need to go in the real world, and what people do on the ground in large companies is now is getting further and further along and hard to control. Can you actually take that contract and push it near the transaction? So what we are seeing from an AI perspective is really AI not as artificial intelligence, but really cognitive intelligence. Can you figure out what is happening and then give enough information to the person, the human, who can influence that outcome?
I think, look, AI is quite fundamental. I mean, I think Ajay said it best. It's not just AI or humans. It's the how the two come together. And also, I think it's not about AI being the solution to every problem. AI needs a lot of building blocks to come in place. Before it can actually happen. And when we do this work, I mean, there is just a lot of these buzzwords that are there in, as we work with customers. But I think it's a fundamental design of, okay, how do you want to reimagine your business? How do you want to reimagine your operations? How do you want to reimagine your product maybe? Right? And then use AI and data and all these concepts to actually make that outcome happen. I do want to share, maybe taking 30 seconds on the work, let's say that we did with one of our customers, Larsen and Toubro. And if you look at it, it's a vast enterprise. Everybody knows that. They, as you can imagine, they have multiple applications, starting from their SAP system to their IT system to their payroll system to all the line of business applications. So you can imagine they were doing digital for a lot of time, right? But what they did during the pandemic was they created a bot. Right now, the bot was created using AI. right? And the bot was actually picking up data from all these different systems and bringing it together into one interface, you can say, which is the bot over here. And the best part is they integrated the bot with Teams, because Teams is something that every employee of there was using day to day to connect, right? Now you don't have to go to any other application. You don't have to train the employees into 6 different applications. You can simply say, hey, you are in Teams, you have a query, you want to raise a ticket, you want to find a resource, just go there, just talk to the bot, and the bot obviously uses AI and cognitive to get the response back to the employees. Now, I think this is a fantastic example which says how do humans and AI work together? How AI is not just one, I mean, it's not the solution to every problem, but actually rides on all the IT investments you've made. And again, back to my original point, this is something which is here to stay. This is a fundamental reimagination, right? It's not going to go back once they come back to the normal from COVID. So I think that's an example I thought I'd share with the panel.
Manpreet, do you see this? What do you see? You're also consulting, companies all the time, giving them advice on how to do things. Is there greater focus on the tools, on the technologies? Should I use AI, or is there greater focus in India currently on driving the design and thinking through the strategy first and then going for the technology? What do you see on the ground?
Yeah. I mean, just building on that conversation and the question itself, Alokesh, I think one thing where I see a big opportunity is, and this is where AI and humans come together, is this need for, upskilling the workforce. So, there was a culture maybe a few years back where, I would call it the hippo culture, where the highest paid employee would take the decisions in the organization, right? You have the CTOs and CDOs and CEOs or the innovation officers taking those innovative calls. I mean, those days are gone. We will have to get to a world where citizen-led innovation becomes a life, where micro assets, micro innovations can be brought to life. And that is where data will be leveraged. That is where AI will be leveraged. That is where intelligent automation will be leveraged. And that is where a quantum leap will happen, where large companies will move. And that's an opportunity that I still think needs to be worked upon. And as more and more of that begins to happen, automatically AI and humans will be here to stay. Right now, I don't think that's happening at scale, and forward-looking companies are beginning to invest on that agenda.
Yeah, but it's a transition that will take its own time, I guess. One of the things that Jairaj, you wanted to come in on?
Yes, Alokesh,
Yes.
Very interesting conversation. In the aviation industry and airline industry, yes, we're very technology driven. We use a lot of data. We use a lot of technology tools to enhance services. But I still feel personally that you cannot replace the human touch. So how do you still deliver the kind of service that is for speed of seamless travel, making it simple to move around the airport or make a booking. But at the end of the day, it will never replace the warmth and friendliness of a human person helping you at the terminal itself or on the aircraft or when you are in trouble. So how do you balance the drive to provide using technology to drive service and yet get our frontline staff to be technologically savvy, yet have the warmth and friendliness to deliver the kind of service that really makes a difference. Because at the end of the day, with all airlines being equal, what will differentiate between one airline and the other is the quality of the service of the staff itself. So these are some of the things that I feel that makes a difference. You can have all the technology in the world, but the differentiation is the quality of the service of your people on the front line.
I think, Jairaj, I probably differ a little bit. Last week there was a very watershed moment in my mind for this decade at least, where a set of images that were tweeted on Twitter for 5,000 days were sold for $69 million. And I always thought, owning a painting is a very personal experience, right? And if I had all the money in the world, would I pay 69 million for a JPEG? I wasn't sure. But when I looked at it, I thought, the definition of experience, the definition of what humans like and need, the definition of, if you look at what Rajinder, the business he is in terms of selling commercial vehicles, the autonomous vehicles are going to change completely, how you sell, how you run, how you operate, how you maintain, all of that, and how you own. Because probably 5 years later, Rajendra is going to be leasing vehicles as opposed to selling vehicles, right? So I think that experience is changing completely, and that's where that hybrid future actually comes in. Technology, digitization, and the human touch has to come in together to make this real.
Absolutely. And since you mentioned Rajendra, I was actually going to go to Rajendra only with my next question, because Rajendra, we were talking about, serving customers, and in this whole group, you serve a completely unique set of customers, fleet operators, individual trucks and bus owners. So that kind of customer is hugely different, and their expectations also are something that we are not very clear about. Can you tell us a little bit about, what's your role and how can the COO act as a catalyst to find new ways to serve customers, especially customers of the kind that you serve? What are you doing?
I think if I look at our experience, or maybe anywhere in the fleet owners, customer nature may be different, work may be different, but today what he wants is the service, good service, whichever field he is. And here also nature of service is different, but broadly he wants that his after sale experience has to be very, very good. And this we have realized after 10 years of our lot of struggle, that we had a very good product, Volvo pedigree products and all those things, how we can make our mark in India and how we can become a very strong player. And this service, I think there we found that one thing, that how we can connect all the vehicle. So we went ahead with a 100% connected vehicle first in India. And then we set up based on the Volvo experience in US, uptime center. They have an uptime center which we set up here in India, in Madhya Pradesh, in our plant, very state of the art uptime center where each and every vehicle data is available to us. Vehicle, if some failure has happened in the vehicle, some problem has come in, we are able to guide the technician, because now today we are living in BS6 technology. It's equivalent to Euro 6 technology, very complex. Lot of electronics is there in the vehicle, almost 7 to 8 sensors, 7 actuator, and very complex after treatment system. It is like a chemical factory you are putting on the vehicle today in BS6, particularly diesel vehicles, commercial vehicle. Each and every vehicle, whatever failure happen, it reaches the dealership. Competency building, because these people, you can imagine that at dealership people are not very competent, and a lot of churning is also there. From our uptime center, we can, once he switching in the vehicle and in the engine management system, he switch on the dongle, the vehicle, all the data is available to us. We are able to tell him what is the fault, what is the diagnostic, and what he need to do that thing. That's number one. That's a reactive way to help and making sure the vehicle is upped in very, very short time, ensuring that 98% of the time vehicle is running on the road, not sitting in the workshop of the total life cycle. And second is the very, very proactive working, that we know, once we know the data is available to us, we know that what is going to fail after 1,000 kilometers. If engine is overheating, or there's emissions are higher, or there's a limpo mode is getting activated, we know the data, and we are able to talk with the driver and the owner and fleet owner and tell him that this is what your vehicle is going to happen, and you need to approach the dealership which is 20 kilometers away from your destination. You can go to the dealership, part is available there, and within half an hour vehicle will be rectified and vehicle will be taken care of that. So 5 days of vehicle downtime has been brought down to 2 hours. That's where we are able to make a difference and provide a service. And fleet owner, he has got only one thing, his vehicle should be on the road maximum percentage of the time. He should have best in class fuel efficiency, and he should have the best turnaround time in terms of power and torque. We should be like in GST era today, e-commerce era. Earlier, Mumbai Delhi trip people used to talk about weeks, the 2 weeks time between 10 years back. Today people talk in hours. To ensuring that vehicle has got that power and torque, vehicles remain on the road, how we get connected with the vehicle, provide the support from the uptime center. That's where the future, and that's where we are working. And it will go, next stage will be the how we provide that driver alert system, that whenever driver is about to sleep or he's fatigued, we are able to caution his fleet owner or driver also, so that he can take him off, so that he doesn't meet the accident. So safety, accident, and then moving to the autonomous, that's the next phase. All those areas, I think digital interface, digital way of working, and a lot of support we are getting from Volvo also in this thing. And that's where we are going to make sure that our customers, fleet owners are taken care of to the fullest extent.
Rahul, your view on this? You have
So
a completely different set of customers of course, they are also your customers, right? To Rajendra's customers
Absolutely.
are also yours.
Traditionally, we look at human beings as our customers as a broad category. So everybody needs insurance. Now, there are two impacts of the entire pandemic. One is a heightened acceptance of the fact that nobody is immortal and we do need insurance. And India being one of the lowest penetrated countries in the world from any metric as far as insurance is concerned. So that's a perverse positive impact of the entire pandemic. The second piece is that we as an organization at Future Generali have realized that the future lies in ecosystems and how you plug into an ecosystem. The ecosystem could be something traditional like a bank, or the ecosystem could be something completely different and visionary like what we are doing today with the future retail network. Now here you have a lot of people walking into Big Bazaar, for example, and traditionally you would have approached them and spoken to them. But today this is where AI, and I don't want to use that cliche, but this is where analytics and digital plays a very enmeshed role. Based on the shopping habits of people, we are actually able to now customize their requirements or needs in terms of what they would need in terms of an insurance. Simple thing like whether a person takes a carry-on bag or brings it with himself is actually a good biaser of what kind of insurance can be actually offered. So now this is where the functionality of AI of analytics has come in. Previously, it was all front-ended, making things look better and easier. The customer is now the entire targeting piece. How do you search for a precise customer, not from your perspective, but from the prospect's customer perspective? How do you align the product to that particular customer? This has got fine-tuned. So you have data, your ability to sift data, your ability to target the right prospect for the right product, but more importantly, also decide the fulfillment mechanism. Is it going to be digital? Is it going to be physical? Is it going to be phygital? I think that is what is the big change that we are seeing in our insurance industry today. And that is what is helping us to sort of push. So today, we can actually decide on the buying patterns, we can decide on the visiting patterns, we can decide on the various electronics that a person carries, that what is the best product that can be fitted. And again, offer this in a manner that is convenient to the customer. So I think that is a big change for us. Secondly, it has now allowed us to come away from this purely face-to-face advisory and move into a remote educatory kind of a sales process where you keep educating the customer so that it becomes more, I need this, not I was sold this. Because there's a cliche that insurance is never bought, it's sold. I think that cliche is now undergoing a metamorphosis.
Great. So we have a question on scaling operations with stability and sustainability. And I think ESG and sustainability are becoming buzzwords in the corporate world. And as COOs, you also have to look at how your operations are going in a direction that is also sustainable for the business and for your other stakeholders, like including your employee and your customers, right? So how can the COO really influence these operations, and how do you tell the audience how you can scale your operations keeping sustainability and stability in mind? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll try and take a shot, Lokesh. I think, I don't know how many of you know, a lot of buzzword is there around cryptocurrencies and bitcoins and all of this, correct? And the amount of electricity required to generate these bitcoins mining is about 0.5% of the total world's electricity consumption. And if I translate that back to the industry where I'm coming from, AI, we write tons of lines of codes which need training, which need inference, and those are, if they're not sufficient, they can actually create a lot of electricity consumption. So that's one extreme angle which we are thinking of in terms of how to make AI not only more ethical from a usability point of view, but also use the resources, use the cloud compute in an efficient manner, so that it's a long-term sustainable model which we can build.
Okay, Jairaj?
Put a lot of focus on sustainability, especially in terms of using resources, renewable resources. In fact, 100% of our electricity needs at a terminal is all from renewable resources, using wind, right? So wind power. So it is the way of the future that you cannot run a business without considering all this sustainable future, right? So water, we are looking at how to build more ponds to harvest rainwater in the terminal itself. So it's not all about just flying passengers in and out. How do we keep the airport going? How do we save the environment? How do we protect the environment? So this is always at the forefront of strategy. So we are focusing a lot on sustainability and making sure that we become a responsible airport.
And just to sort of add to that, sustainability, is it a means to an end? And then I try to look at it today. The cliche is geography is history. So the fact that you had hundreds of people traveling from one place to another, and you try traveling from Churchgate to Borivali in Bombay, I mean, it's an exercise in futility and threat to life, depending on which mode you actually use. So is that in some way helping us, to sort of do our contribution towards it? And that's one piece that I sort of look at it. But I also look at it in terms of the CXO gathering, as you said, and the X has been the X factor. There was a time of chief marketing officer. There was a time of chief people officer. And today, I think it's genuinely the chief operating officer sort of era that comes in, because it's a cross-cutting initiative across, various initiatives that you're running in the organization. You actually have a bird's eye view to all that. Operational excellence, again, when I talk about simply by ensuring a proper work from home policy, you're actually helping the climate in your own way. Now, it is easier said than done, because work from home doesn't mean you simply ask people to work from home. You need to then give them the right tools. The whole mechanism of appraisal of people is going to undergo change. You were so used to seeing people, you were so used to their body language, you were so used to their physical presence and contribution. Are we prepared today to sort of do it remotely? So when we talk about the entire sustainability piece, this is one angle that we need to consider. The obvious is taking place today. Everything that was going out in terms of paper. I mean, insurance industry used to generate reams and tons of paper. Future Generali today has the capability of sending you your policy document, which is a thick document, let me assure you, on WhatsApp. Now the regulatory aspects too have to change, because this has to be acceptable. So sustainability cannot be an individual organization's deliverable. The whole ecosystem, the regulator, the compliance aspects, people's acceptability, the ability to trace and mitigate fraud in such cases. How do you handle cyber security? All these are sort of have to come together to build sustainability on a platform. And then that's where I think the chief operating officer is going to play a huge role in terms of the remit. At least that's the way I look at sustainability today.
I just wanted to kind of extend what Rahul said. Is a very important point. The supply chain. How do you make sure that the supply chain is ethical? It is sustainable. You're preventing child labor. There's all kinds of stuff here, not just sustainability, where you do better business, right? And for us, lots of our customers have found that actually making these downstream things sustainable and kind of making sure that they are aligned to corporate policies is very hard. So what they've started doing is actually starting enforcing it in the contract with a fine if suppliers don't follow it. But then, what we have done and gone ahead is actually apply the blockchain to make sure that the entire supply chain follows this, not just the first tier supplier, but the second, third, fourth, fifth, and so on. And one of the things we've noticed, like automotive manufacturers, making sure that the cobalt mines, where the cobalt is sourced, is not blood mineral, it's not using child labor, it's not using forced labor, and making sure that the contracts reach there. And that doesn't guarantee compliance, but it does guarantee at least contractual compliance. That's the first step of doing that. And I think that's where, having an open, transparent supply chain, if you go to most companies' home pages on, sourcing, ethical sourcing, and so on, including Microsoft, Starbucks, Pizza Hut, you go anywhere, you'll see that there is a component where they want to find out where the pizza corn came from that makes the pizza, where the coffee beans come from, which get into your cup. And I think that transparency, that data, that kind of also AI, because AI has to make sure that you're actually able to track all of this, is getting more and more critical. And that's where I think, we have a chance of building a future where it is sustainable, it's more ethical, and business is doing the right things and not getting carried away with profits and the bottom line.
Yeah, look, if I can come in now, I think you asked the question around, how do you scale your operations in a sustainable way? So I would like to, maybe come at it from two things that impact the operation, right? Your people and your technology. Eventually, that's what your operation is all about. And I think if you look at your people first, right, there is an element of sustainability there. Because I think Ajay was saying, right, you can't make decisions at top. You've got to push decision making down. So as technology becomes pervasive, as the last mile of your employee chain also uses technology, are we giving them the right tools? Are we skilling them right? Becomes an important consideration, right? We all saw when work from home was happening that people were getting burnt out. So if you imagine a hybrid working scenario where you've hired a lot of people, you scale your operation, how do you get to know that your people are getting burnt out or not? So, we built this AI into Teams, for example, right, which reduces fatigue, which gives you insight into how you are spending time, so that you can have a really good conversation, manager to employee, to say, hey, look, you are actually spending all this time in so many meetings, take a break, and how do you make that sustainable? Also making it easy for people to work from remote locations. For example, here only we were using virtual backgrounds, we are using noise cancellation, which is inbuilt. We don't realize it. It is technology behind the scenes, trying to make it now very, very easy for people to connect from anywhere. Right. So that is one element of, I think, sustainable. I think the second thing is the technology you are using, the platform you're using, right? Is that creating it in a way that it is sustainable, right? So, for example, in Microsoft, we said, in the next sort of 7 to 8 years, most certainly by 2030, we'll be carbon negative. Right, in another 20 years, we will remove all the carbon that's ever emitted from Microsoft, since it was founded. We announced the innovation fund such that we can actually spur innovation around this. The reason why this is important is because when we work with customers, we are able to tell them you are working with a platform which is keeping sustainability in mind, for the reasons we all know it's very, very important. So I think as you think about operations, we've got to approach it from both the people angle and the technology platform angle. And I think Monish said it right. You've got to see where it is sourced from, where the value chain is coming from. I think that is one aspect, but also make it sustainable for our people. I think that's how you can really scale it up. Otherwise, it's very easy to scale up and then figure out that it is starting to break at the seams. That's what your CEO doesn't want. Your chief operating officer wants to make sure it is going to be able to do that. Right?
Absolutely. Manpreet, you have the last word.
I think it's going to be a hockey stick shift towards, customers, employees, and capital chasing companies that have the ESG proposition right. And it's going to happen at a very, very rapid pace. So just when we are breathing easy saying, yeah, we've learned to deal with the customer and we've learned to track the data and we've learned to serve the customer, if we haven't tracked our energy consumptions and the waste we are generating, which, trust me, a lot of us may speak, but corporate India is not doing a good job of that right now. Very soon we'll realize we will either be out of capital or customers if we don't get that ESG plot right. And digital technology, data, I mean, all that we've spoken today with the customer in mind is going to be equally relevant from an ESG perspective. Sooner we start, the better the edge we'll carry.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you very much, Manpreet. That was, gentlemen, all of you. Thank you so much for this hour that you spent with us. It's an absolutely riveting conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. One of those panels that I really enjoyed moderating. Lots and lots and lots of insights. Such a wonderful discussion. We spoke about customers. There's so much emphasis on technology that I was at times perplexed that is this a CIO discussion or is it a COO discussion, right? These days, even CEOs tend to talk a lot about digital when we get into discussions with them, which is great because that means that all organizations are looking toward greater productivity, greater efficiencies, and driving greater thing in the long run. So that's fantastic, and thank you all very much. Thank you to the audience for listening in. Remember that we have another session coming up. Stay back for that, and we will have now a message from our partner Microsoft, and then we'll move into the next session with my colleague Sucheta. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Alok.
you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Great meeting.
That was fun. Lots of learning. Thank you, folks.
Quite a phenomenal panel discussion, and we've been having a great event today so far. And now it's time for a very special interaction. We have with us Arvind Gupta, founder and head of the Digital India Foundation, where he leads digital inclusion, internet governance, cybersecurity, domestic manufacturing, startup India, and smart cities.
Mr. Gupta has over 25 years of experience in leadership, policy, and entrepreneurial roles, both in the Silicon Valley as well as in India. He has served as the CEO of mygov.in and head of BJP's National Technology Department for 3 consecutive terms. Welcome to this session, Mr. Gupta. This is the Economic Times Microsoft Resilient Masterminds. You are joining us on the discussion around building strategic leadership for a hybrid future.
Mr. Gupta, welcome. Thank you very much for finding time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So first, Mr. Gupta, we'd just like to understand from you a little bit, coming from your experience from working with government in the areas of, digital inclusion and so many other areas we heard, right? Smart cities, internet governance, data security, privacy. Tell us a little bit about your experience with working with the government in these areas. How has the experience been and what are the trends you see going forward? What are the things that are going to happen now?
I think allocation, Suchetna, I can tell you very exciting things that are happening. But the biggest, the question that you really asked is the role of government. And, the Prime Minister says the government should not be in the business of being in business. And that is exactly what, at least in the digital world, the government is doing. It's acting as an enabler. And it is over the last 7 years, I think this the transformation, a very, very bipartisan across India transformation that we have seen, with the government being at the center of that transformation and really catapulting India into the 4th industrial revolution. Now, let me give you with some examples. India is home to the only non-private platform in the world. You've seen all the platforms, the FANG platforms, the FAANG platforms from Silicon Valley, the BB80 platforms from the Chinese Silicon Valley in Shenzhen. We have, apart from these 9 platforms, the 10th platform, which has 1 billion users, is actually a platform from India, which is an indigenously built platform called the India Stack or the Aadhaar Stack. The government just acted in a very, very new policy thinking of creating digital public platforms as public goods. So it's public infrastructure. And built on this infrastructure, you've had now numerous innovations on top of it. The whole fintech revolution that you hear in India, the whole DBT that the government uses, the whole UPI revolution, the payments revolution that you hear, it's all built on top of a public goods platform called India Stack. No other country has done this. And 2 things are very important in the approach that I have seen. The government is acting as an enabler, soft regulator, and 3, wherever they're trying to build, they're building platforms of scale. You mentioned my role in the government, MyGov. It's the world's biggest. And with India, everything has to be the biggest. Indigenously built citizen engagement platform. More than 15 million users interact with the government, get information about the government. And it was highlighted at the largest scale possible was during the pandemic, that we are seeing the fag end of the pandemic with the vaccine drive even starting. MyGov released the Arogya Setu, has been a big partner with Arogya Setu. Arogya Setu is one of the big platforms which is partnered with COOs to deliver now the last mile vaccine appointments and everything else. So I think the whole approach of the government to build platforms which are scalable, indigenous, open, and can operate with each other, starting from Aadhaar to UPI to eKYC to MyGov to Arogya Setu, is the lesson that I think I have learned from operating within the company, within the government. And I think the government itself today is a biggest startup disruptor and an enabler at the same time.
Right. You talk of startups, and at the heart of it is innovation. So we've been reading up about you, and we see that you're a strong believer of solve for India, sell to the world. So how do you see the position of India as an innovation hub of the world?
That's a great question. See, you mentioned I lived in Silicon Valley. I've said this many times. Silicon Valley innovates for the top billion of the world. And the world has about 8 billion people, give or take. Silicon Valley will always innovate top down. And you've seen that approach. I mean, if you e-commerce started as a top-down thing, the expensive Apple phones are top-down approach. Nobody at the bottom of the pyramid can afford that smartphone. But those are very valuable companies, great approach. India's approach is very different. And as you said, number one, its approach is bottom-up. Take solutions, produce platforms which solve very difficult societal problems. And if you can solve problems at the bottom of the pyramid, of course it can reach the top. And everybody will be a user. And that's exactly what India has done. And that approach, when it takes to the government as a service, or to startups who are using that innovation approach of bit sizing transactions, making it very low value, but volume is huge. Those lessons, which are, and India presents the most diverse, most difficult landscape for any innovation. We have literacy levels which are varied across the country. We have languages which are 22, 23 languages. And we have, in cities, 4G working very well, and in the rural part of India, 2G struggling. So, if you can work in those environments, you can work anywhere in the world, right? And that is the lesson that is solving for India first, and taking that learning and then selling to the world, whether it's the government solutions or solutions by our startups. And we are seeing that movement happening all across. We're seeing some of the fintech startups going to developing countries, solving their problems, becoming part of those cultures, those societies. So remember, India's approach is different from an income pyramid perspective, not top down, but bottom up. And that's what the next 7 billion of the planet need. They need problems which help them get better livelihood, better sustenance, better education, better skills, better identity.
Right. In fact, what you say reminds me of many years ago, when reverse innovation became a buzzword in India, and you will remember Professor, Vijay Govindraj and some of the other management gurus who always said that reverse innovation should be happening from developing economies like India, where a lot of innovation happens and it can then be scaled up in other countries, including in developed economies. So that's a great, way to do it. And I think the startups are really taking that reverse innovation paradigm to a completely different kind of level. And so great to hear you on that. Meanwhile, let us take a look at a slightly different aspect. We have all been talking about AI, ML, IoT, and all these, new age digital technologies. And in the future, we are going to see already, there are signs of quantum, science, and there's mixed reality. And so a lot of technology is going to influence our societies and our lives and businesses going forward, right? So how do you see these technologies really, they are leveling the playing field for the populations across the world. But from an organization perspective, what would you say are some of the fundamentals for organizations to innovate on these technologies responsibly, on the issues of ethics, trust, security? What is it that they should be doing?
I think, Alokesh, you asked a very, very pertinent, a very important question. Let's take health for an example. Now, health, you wear these watches, which are also IoT devices at the end of the day. They have sensors. They sense certain things from your body, and then, probably store it on your phone, hopefully just this phone, and with your consent, probably pass it on. But now the whole issue of ethics and trust in technology will become very, very important. For startups, for innovators, for large and small companies, I think the biggest thing for the next, and I can't predict 10 years, I can probably go for 3 to 4 years, is going to be trust. And if you are giving that trust to the user that you are using their data with their consent, or you are using the data ethically, or if at all, and you're not sharing it for the purpose of data harvesting or marketing, I think, and the fact that you are doing what you're supposed to do and not going beyond your mandate, the trust factor in technology, the ethics factor in the usage of technology will become a very, very underlying thing for success in the future, for success of any innovation in the future. And I think that will apply to all technologies, whether that's AI, ML. I mean, you look at the issue of ethics in AI. The black box that 99% or 99.9999% of humanity will not understand. But if that is an AI engine that you're using to give credit to the masses, but has a bias built inside it, has certain exclusion criteria that you will never figure out, but you are being told this engine decided whether you will get a credit or not, or this engine decided whether you get a loan or not. And you finally, if you test it and you find that trust is not there in that algorithm, that will be bad for that organization, that company, or whosoever else uses those algorithms. So I think the whole codification of trust and ethics in our processes and our technology will be inherent. And that's my big advice to start.
Along with the trust and security, the other aspect of technology is inclusivity. As someone who's seen digital inclusion take shape through the past decade for India, what do you have to say about technology and its role as a unifying factor, which will help India accelerate its growth trajectory?
Again, that's a great point, because again, as I said, given the bottom-up approach, technology has to play an inclusive role, not an exclusive role. And let's look at the current situation of vaccination. Take the enrollment that has just started, what is called the phase 3 of the vaccination, where we are enrolling common citizens, 60 plus senior citizens, 45 plus to 60 as people with comorbidities. We also know that there is a digital divide in India. And that brings about this whole point of, do we only have an approach which is only on the smartphone or on a platform, or no? I think technology, the platforms have to be very, very cognizant of the learning that comes from such big rollouts. Is that, for example, the COOs platform in India, you can access it through of course the digital means, as the portals and other apps like Arogya Setu, but you can also access it via call center. You can register and the same backend works. So that's what I call offline access. It can work through CSCs, so assisted access. And so the same system is working via many means. And that eventually those people will come online and their data will be there. It will be singly stored. And that's where the identity becomes a unique identifier, the Aadhaar platform. But the lesson is that you cannot make technology something that excludes a lot of majority of population. Another great example in the Indian context is UPI. I know many people sometimes think UPI is only through many of these wallets or payment gateways or banks. But do you all need to understand UPI is also used by people with non-smartphones, people who have the candy bar phone, by using something called USSD, *99 hash. And that's a great example of the same technology working on a non-smartphone. And I give that example globally because we are very proud of that this is the way we tackle tough problems. And to all the audience, to all the participants in this conference, I will request you to just take a time out and press *99 hash on your phones and see what happens. The same platform that you have seen as Beam or as within an ICICI or SBI suddenly becomes alive on a non-smartphone. And that's the beauty of inclusion in India. Our approach is bottom up, making sure the offline inclusion also happens, making sure people with low literacy levels are included. And that's a great lesson when you ask Solve for the World. That's another great lesson for innovators and startups. Can you extend your platform by using other means to people who probably cannot, can book a cab, for example, with a smartphone, or their internet is down. Imagine if your internet is down and through whatever reason, but you can still book a car or a cab and the cab will show up. So that's innovation. But the roots of those innovation come from the question that you raised, Suchetna, is can we learn from how to keep everybody included?
That's fantastic. In fact, I'm going to try *99 hash right after this meeting gets over. And it's, Mr. Gupta, there were the older days of when we were talking about e-governance, right? And e-governance, we used to, as journalists, we used to track how different states are doing on e-governance, right? There would be ratings and rankings on e-governance and things like that. But now that has moved into digital governance. And the scale, like you rightly pointed out, so many examples of how digital governance has really taken over governance and has helped the government and citizens also in different ways in collaborating. If you could just outline to us in the evolution of this journey going forward, what are the challenges that are still there. There's obvious that we are leveraging technology not only through digital but even through means by which we can use non-smartphones to get access and to deliver services. But what are the challenges that are still there? Some improvements that you feel should be looked at. What is the way forward?
I think that's another very excellent point. The way forward for you, we call it Digital India 2.0, is again, number one, a lot of indigenously built platform, a lot more dependence on our local, the whole, Atmanirbhar Bharat concept. Let's build more internally. Data centers. Can we have a lot more data centers which are governed and managed in India? A combination of the hybrid cloud, which governments, state governments also need to adopt. I mean, today with the advent of cloud and the adoption of cloud, we know we can scale up very fast, and that's another lesson that I think the government has learned very fast. The whole COVIN platform is on a hybrid cloud. So I think the whole approach of how do you make that agile methodology come to the government rollout of platforms needs to not only be central driven, but also be driven by each state, I can go to even deeper levels, but let's have all the states be equal participant in that. I'm not saying they are not. They are equal participants right now. Some vary, as you say, there was a digital e-governance ranking. Same, there is a disparity. There is a digital governance disparity, but we want to make sure that all states, all union territories of India are equal on that, because this is digital governance is easy governance. Digital governance is a governance that includes everybody. Digital governance is transparent. And that's something that the Prime Minister has led from the front, that we need more transparent, more distributed governance, which really disrupts the way the government operates.
As you mentioned that India has its unique problems, and therefore India needs to innovate for itself. So in this scheme of things, what do you think is the role of IoT in buildings, education, healthcare, utilities, and even beyond that?
I can go on and on the use of IoT in each of these verticals that you have mentioned. But healthcare, I mentioned at the passing that, you have all these smart devices coming up. Agriculture, our biggest problem, one of the biggest things that we face with the stated goal of this doubling the farmers' income is really using local information to give local advice to those farmers. With the soil health cards that we have right now, use of IoT is being done by a lot of innovators already. That needs to be expanded in agriculture. You talked about IoT and sensors and smart buildings. We've set out this whole task of smart cities. How more can we make our cities more smarter by using more sensors, traffic sensors, pollution sensors, other environmental sensors, people movement sensors, so that, this is where the design of new cities, new buildings, new sub-cities, mini cities have to be all sensor driven. Today, the sensors are limited to our phones and our watches and a little bit that we are seeing, but this is exploding as we're talking. Globally, and India is not far behind in numbers, but we have to use it a lot more. The big challenge is retrofitting. Greenfield projects are all having a lot of IoT, a lot of sensors. You see a new hotel you go to, you see all the sensors on, temperature sensors, motion sensors. But if you now come to the, slightly the older lot, and that's where the retrofitting is required. So that same logic applies to cities and sub-cities and communities, that we have to start using things which help people in safety, in mobility, and in environmental concerns, alerts. And the use of sensors is highly required, a lot more required. I foresee in the next 2 to 3 years that will really go up a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for those answers. Great listening to you, and we could go on for the next 10 minutes actually just listening to you speak about all the changes that India has been going through. And as you've pointed out that, India's uniqueness lies in its population, the age of the population, and its people, which many could see as a disadvantage, but taking it as an opportunity, we need to innovate for ourselves and then perhaps sell to the world. As you said, solve for India, sell to the world. Thank you so much, Mr. Gupta, for sparing the time, for taking the time out and speaking to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you.